It wasn't too long before the local volunteer firefighters stood there staring at the silhouette of a limping man as he hauled more pews and flooring to be burned. He introduced himself as the new pastor and shared the bishop's vision to rebuild this church and parish. As the evening wore on, more than 20 people had come by to help out. Over the next several months, garages and farm shops were turned into places where lumber was planed, pews built and varnished, and roofing supplies stored. A lifelong parishioner stopped by and confessed that years earlier, for safekeeping, she had taken out of the church all the candlesticks, the processional cross, and Eucharistic vessels. Perhaps the children could help polish them. Even the good Lutherans would stop by the church, bringing good wishes, and of course, sandwiches, coffee, and donuts, because they knew how Catholics were rookies at fellowship. On Easter Sunday, all was ready. Father bustled about, making sure the servers had their last-minute instructions, and that there was a battery in the new wireless microphone. When the bishop arrived to bless and rededicate the church and parish, the place was packed. And the bishop went on and on about the growth and expansion and renewal and how he knew he had picked the right pastor. Finally, he thanked the good pastor and invited the people to join him in a huge and thunderous applause. After being invited to say a few words, the pastor went right past the pulpit and into the aisle, looking at each family that he had come to know, each person he knew did something. And as he walked down that aisle, he did a measured and solo applause. From the back of the church, because he wore another new wireless microphone, he finally spoke. "You are very generous in thanking me," he said. "Now let me thank you. From this day forward, when you look at this beautiful church and you want to give me or the bishop credit, remember what it looked like when it was just me and God." In 2009, Pope Benedict XVI proclaimed the Year of the Priest. In his letter to priests, the Holy Father called upon the priest to be open and more fully aware of those sectors of cooperation with the lay faithful. I'm going to do a series of extended quotes. They should be willing to listen to lay people, give brotherly consideration to their wishes, and acknowledge their experience and competence in the different fields of human activity. In this way, the priest will be able, together with them, to discern the signs of the times, while testing the spirits to discover if they be of God. Priests must discover with faith, recognize with joy, and foster diligently the many and varied charismatic gifts of the laity. In other writings, Pope Benedict called upon the lay faithful to be co-responsible for the mission of the church, always in communion with the local and universal church. There are many other quotable quotes from the documents of the Second Vatican Council to St. John Paul II, to magisterial teachings, to pastoral letters from various national conferences of bishops. It is quite obvious to me that this is one of the central principles of church governance, that we be in conversation with each other, heads and bodies, priests and people, parishes and dioceses. We hear in the decree on the apostolate of the laity from the documents of the Second Vatican Council that we have a very serious responsibility to call forth the gifts of the baptized to take their rightful roles in helping to carry out the mission of Jesus Christ. I quote from the document, "For the Christian vocation by its very nature is also a vocation to the apostolate, No part of the structure of a living body is merely passive, but has a share in the functions as well as life of the body. So too in the body of Christ, which is the church. The whole body, in keeping with the proper activity of each part, derives its increase from its own internal development. It goes on, indeed, the organic union in this body and the structure of the members are so compact that the member who fails to make his proper contributions to the development of the church must be said to be useful neither to the church nor to himself. That's a strong statement. And by your presence here, you get a little reprieve for the day. But it means that we must care for our sisters and brothers who, for whatever reason, are passive in living out the life of faith. And therein, the Pastoral Council, on a diocesan and on a parish level, looks at how do we make it easy for people to bring their discerned gifts forward for the good of the church. The 1983 Code of Canon Law put it in a more positive light. The membership of the church have a right to meaningful participation in the apostolate. It is indeed our responsibility as leaders of the church to organize and structure our parishes and dioceses so that people can be involved. It is again that pastoral question, if everyone in the parish got it, could we handle it? Before looking at the structure of consultation in the diocese and in parishes, there is an historical perspective. In an overly simplistic summary of the Catholic Church in the United States over the last 100 years, there has been a dramatic shift. 100 years ago, the people in the pews were asked, as the old saying goes, to pray, pay, and obey. The good priests and sisters handle most everything from faith formation to the ordering of hosts and candles. In the 1960s, concurrent with the Second Vatican Council, the United States underwent a most tumultuous chapter. Many of us lived through that chapter of riots and assassinations, of civil rights and civil disobedience. Somehow through it all, the Holy Spirit kept the church moving forward to meet the new challenges of a new modern age. Following the Second Vatican Council, a whole new professional community of theologically and pastorally trained staff began to replace the dwindling numbers of women and men from consecrated life, from the religious orders. The offices of bishop and pastor expanded as dioceses and parishes hired staff to meet the needs of the people. These creative and highly motivated pioneers of faith initiated entirely new departments and a rapid expansion of parish-based programs as ministry shifted from father and sister to a parish staff. Meanwhile, in the pews, the faithful were experiencing lay lectors, lay people serving as extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist, and in some parishes, they put name tags on the ushers and called them ministers of hospitality. For some of our ushers, there was a little gap between what they had been doing for 50 years and now asked to smile and greet people. That took a few more years to get that into our ushers. By the early and mid-1970s, many parishes, especially here in the Midwest, started their first pastoral councils. By the late 1980s, in my Diocese of St. Paul in Minneapolis, over 98% of the over 200 parishes had parish councils or pastoral councils. The Archdiocesan Pastoral Council in St. Paul in Minneapolis had over 40 members selected by a dozen or more deanery councils. In general, these early councils were large and cumbersome. a representative model was used, and what they had in a diversity of opinions, they didn't have in the ability to do strategic planning. They were seen as promoting dissension and division. By the mid-1990s, many bishops and pastors went sour on these consultative bodies. It seems that the participants all had their own agenda, and no one could really focus on the needs of the diocese or the parish. As an example of why some bishops and pastors either disbanded pastoral councils or begrudgingly went to the meetings dreaming of disbanding them, it was made evident to me in my first pastorate in the early 1990s. At my first parish council meeting, I was handed their top 10 list of my priorities. Some of the items were very good, but I noticed that one of the priorities was to change the age of baptism from infants to adults. It seemed that one of the council members had been to a Baptist church where she had witnessed the dedication of her baby nephew. When she asked the pastor why he didn't use water for baptism, the pastor explained that they did baptism at a much older age when the recipient could make a reception or a confession of faith and participate in the ceremony. So it made sense to this council member that we would move the age of baptism so that the baptized would remember their celebration. So at that council meeting, I did an explanation of the church's teachings on baptism, emphasized the meaning of confirmation and that beautiful sacrament, and that there was one thing they could remove from their list. It was a good council meeting. I thought, wow, this is going to be an easy pastorate. Several months later, when the auxiliary bishop visited to install me as pastor, he pointed out to me a laminated sheet of paper typed on the wall outside of the sacristy, taped on the wall. It was the top 10 list, the original one. He pointed to the statement on the age of baptism and said to me, "Do we need to talk about this?" I said, no. But as we're talking about participation of the baptized, we still have a lot of communication to do on what that really means. What does it mean when we say no spectators, no passengers? What do we need to do when, as we want to involve the gifts of the faithful, we first begin with catechesis? Well, what we do is hear. And understanding here that vision question, that if everybody got it, could we handle it? And yes, some people started to get it many years ago. People from the pews came forward, joined the pastoral councils, had new ideas for how to be disciples of Jesus Christ, and new ways of living out the apostolate within the parish community and outside of it. But the model of parish operations did not change. Still to this day, we have reached the point in many parishes where if all of its members step forward to participate in the mission of Jesus Christ or the ministries of the church, we would become overwhelmed and paralyzed in our operations. So by the late 1990s, a model of parish operations emerged in some big cities, where in order to do something new, it meant that it had to be added to some staff member's job description, then budgeted, and then a committee set up to be guided and directed. In this model, many parishes entered into a chapter of development and stewardship programs to generate that ever-elusive surplus so that there would be more room to hire more staff to do more good things. But which more ministry with what surplus revenue? So we boldly ventured into that phenomenon called parish mission statements. It sounded good. The revised parish mission statement would set priorities for limited resources, help staff and parish leadership to decide what should be expanded and sometimes what should be eliminated. Unfortunately, with all due respect to the efforts, in most parishes the mission statement was a creative rewrite of the creed. So began the practice of hiring consultants who conducted feasibility studies and space utilization evaluations. And then came the surveys and workshops mandated by staff to help parish staff understand what the people were saying on the surveys. Then came the task forces to make recommendations on how to implement the suggestions made on the staff-studied surveys, which in turn proposed new ministries and new programs with new committees to meet the new needs of the new people that will be done by the newly hired additional staff. Under this model, to do more just added more staff. By the opening years of the 21st century, the ever-increasing cost of staff drove diocesan and parish budgets beyond the level of expected resources. To solve this dilemma of not having enough money to continue hiring new staff to do new ministries, it was a common practice that new ministry initiatives were added to the same old staff members' job descriptions. As even more people offered their gifts as a way of living out the faith, staff couldn't do any more. Staff, once the initiators and doers of lay ecclesial ministry, once pioneers, had become the no-sayers, who could add another night of meetings, a whole new area of recruiting, training, and supervising, supporting and ministering to volunteers. This is the first point and our first consideration for the future direction of a parish. Does your model of parish organization allow the parish to grow and have growing opportunities for involvement in the pastoral of the laity that doesn't involve hiring more staff to do ministry for a needy body? It is about mission and ministry. We hear over and over again that people of God have a right to participate in the mission and ministry of the church and an obligation to do so as authentic followers of the gospel. Our first consideration for the future direction of formal consultation is, where needed, to move ministry from the staff to the apostolate of the laity, and there our professional resource pupils, our hard-working staff for parish and diocese, are more than eager to be resources for parishes and parish leadership that want to get more people involved to do more things for the good of the church. It is a model of consultation, therefore, that sees staff, whether diocesan or parish, as a resource to support those doing meaningful and transformative work of the apostolate. It is looking to our professional staff as a resource that needs changing the expectations oftentimes of a needy body that sees that staff serves the people. We hire them to do these things for us. We pay them to be Jesus for us. And we know we need Jesus. So here's more money, do more things for us. What is it when every single person is to come forward and do things for the body and staff assist as resources to ensure that it is in communion with the local and universal church, according to, in some cases, civil law, and in all cases, canon law. Consultative structures, as I mentioned in my first talk this morning, can be all over the place. Some parishes and dioceses can have effective pastoral and finance councils, others do not. Some get the job done, swatting killer bees. Others keep busy with revisions to the bylaws. What is typical is that in the inconsistency, there is an obstacle to a shared mission. Under civil law, some states have parishes as separate corporations. Under canon law, No parish is a church unto itself. A shared mission as laid out in the diocesan priority plan means there is consistency across the consultative bodies of the parishes of the diocese. No, they don't have to all be the same, if you will, group of people. Larger parishes may have different needs than smaller parishes. An overly ambitious attempt to have councils, commissions, and committees in smaller parishes can ask the same 5 lay leaders to wear multiple hats. Consistency in mission does not mean conformity to a one-size-fits-all. What you have found at your tables or in between or in the hallways is that wonderful dynamic of conversation where you're looking at the needs in your parish, looking at its council, looking at its communications. What is important is that the connection between the canonical head and the consultative body is defined and formalized so that it doesn't change every time the pastor changes. So it doesn't change every time there's a change in parish leadership. That is a constant that can continue to stay on track with such a developed and wonderful priority plan. I am aware of and have seen that parishes of less than 100 families can be a dynamic community of faith. What does a pastoral council look like in this parish? Well, in every parish there are leaders, Knights of Columbus, councils of Catholic women, extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist to the homebound, people who pray in nursing homes, and never to ever be forgotten or ignored, the ever-powerful leader of the funeral luncheon. In one parish, each of these leaders came together 4 times a year to report on good works and propose ideas that would better support those good works. The pastor both applauded the good works and invited a better support of the parish and diocese. That was a good pastoral council. But there was something missing. In my last pastorate, we had over 4,300 families, as I mentioned. That's some 15,000 members. The Pastoral Council and Finance Council served the needs of the parish very well. Those were lively meetings, a lot of conversation. But what was missing from the mega parish and from the small parish that was just down the road was any connection to the diocese. Blessed be me, for I have sinned. I shared the same attitude about the diocese as did other pastors. A good year was in part defined by never having to go to the chancery. I often said, particularly to the newly ordained assigned to me, that if the chancery burned down and everyone got out alive, I'm not mean. First of all, I wouldn't know about it until I read it in the newspaper, and secondly, it wouldn't make any difference in the operations of the parish. In St. Paul and Minneapolis, we called the chancery downtown or on the hill. It was up there near the cathedral. Well, during bankruptcy, we sold all diocesan property. No, we didn't sell the cathedral. We would never hold that for ransom. But we sold all diocesan property and moved the chancery to a leased office building. Our new address is 777 Forest, so it should not have surprised me and disappointed me then that some pastors called the chancery 666. That gets a huge laugh in St. Paul. It is to the credit of your diocese that you only got a few chuckles. Your relationship as a diocese is very well developed. It is something I applaud you for. But building and rebuilding a neck, that is, the formally defined structure that connects head and body, must include the diocese. I applaud the Pastoral Priority Plan. And yet, parishes that try to grab the whole book and try to do something found it overwhelming. Hopefully, from pastoral ministry days, the office of bishop and the office of pastor and pastoral councils can look at ways in which sections of the priority plan are used as an agenda on every parish council meeting. This will connect the wisdom of the people to comment on what will work and also what will not work, and things that have yet to be heard. And what will work can be a further discussion by that same parish pastoral council about identifying who has the gifts to make it work. In the priority plan are incredible opportunities to do things that in many parishes we're not currently doing. That means a whole new set of people can be brought forward. Don't see it as one more task for very busy and generous lay leaders. See it as opportunities to call forth more people from the pews to do, as St. Teresa of Calcutta reminded us, small things with great love. Calling forth the gifts of the people to carry out the implementation of the diocesan pastoral plan is an opportunity to evangelize, to energize, to bring out in the best of all possible worlds gifts that parishes didn't even know they had. And it adds value to chancery services. In the book of Genesis, Adam was given the task to name all the plants and creatures in the Garden of Eden. In the ancient Near East, naming was a sacred function. To know the name of an angel or demon gave one power over that spiritual being. In the many cultures of today's blessed United States of America, names are all over the place. As a pastor, I did succeed in getting all the confirmation names to be the name of a saint. I did not succeed with baptisms. I can't even count the number of once, never saw before names that have come forward at baptism. For some of you who are parents or grandparents, you know the creative name of our children. I'm used to having to spell out my last name, not my first name. But in formal consultation, names matter. In any given diocese, there are councils, boards, commissions, and committees, ad hoc and standing. Sometimes committees act as if they are a board of directors. Sometimes commissions act as if God appointed them on their own special mission. Here, canon law names the pastoral and financial consultative bodies as councils. There should be no other councils. Boards, yes. Schools love calling their parent advisory committee a board of directors. But boards are a civil term, and it means they are a decision-making body. No, please don't go dumping your school boards. But we do need to make sure that the membership in every section of consultation knows the advisory nature of the body, knows where the responsibility is with the head. Commissions, in the general use of the term, in the structure of consultation, are literally co-mission. They are linked to a pastoral council, and each have their own area of parish life to serve, organize, and coordinate. For many dioceses, they have co-missions that work with pastoral councils in a specific area. In smaller parishes, commissions are an overuse of structure. Again, the same 5 people on the parish council now also serve as the finance council and now have to go to 5 commission meetings. But in larger parishes and for dioceses, commissions can do the work of implementing particular sections of the diocesan pastoral plan. there is wisdom in having some standardization between diocesan and parish commissions. There is also wisdom in making connections within the consultative bodies themselves. Here is a word, liaison. It's a wonderful word in our way of looking at how we live as a church. Liaisons provide the messengers. Minutes verify the message. Because of emails with attachments, it is much easier to make sure that diocesan finance and pastoral councils know something about what is happening in parish finance and pastoral councils, and vice versa. Minutes do this, attachments do this, but liaisons are present at meetings to keep the work of consultation a two-way street. Here there is a caution. Where staff are used, whether with councils or commissions, they are part of the head, a resource for the doers, and a liaison to and from the bishop or the pastor. They should not be members of the pastoral council. While each parish forms and adapts consultative structure to the character of the community, when there is shared mission, there is shared work. When we define our roles and responsibilities, we have a clear understanding of how it is that we work. It's good to have documents that define the structure, whether councils or commissions, but it can be too restrictive to further standardize membership in the bylaws of meetings. There are boilerplates, but each parish can figure out what works best based on a couple of models. One model for council membership is election. Anybody here have elected council members? It always looks good, especially in the United States. But for some parishes, it is a challenge to fill open seats, let alone to have more than one candidate. In some parishes, too few people actually vote, and many more don't really know who the candidates are anyway. The church is not really a democracy, and elections to consultative bodies should include careful catechesis, so that those who are elected by the faithful in the pew still know they are advisory and they're to bring their gifts and wisdom. A second model is discernment. Are people here at the discernment model? All people who are interested in becoming members of the consultative bodies show up, hear about the duties and responsibilities, and then prayerfully consider who among them should serve. I must admit I have never used the discernment model. And there is that challenge again where ultimately who serves are the ones that got their arm twisted or just happen to be the last to leave church. A third model where there are commissions allows each commission to select their representative to serve on the pastoral council. Or where there are not commissions, leaders of the different organizations, as with the example of the smaller parish. These leaders of different organizations within the apostolate are represented at a parish council. The new model piloted in St. Paul, Minneapolis, currently is actually an old model where each parish council sends a rep to a deanery pastoral council, which in turn sends a rep to the diocesan pastoral council. It's just starting out. It's clean, it's connected. It's also another slate of meetings for busy people who will disappear if the agenda does not engage their interests and give meaningful purpose to the gift of their time. Pastors and bishops are usually given their number of appointees, but in reality, all of the members of the pastoral and finance councils, in one way or another, are invited to serve, typically by the pastor or the bishop or one of staff. If you are on a pastoral council, how many of you just walked up and volunteered? How many of you, somewhere, somehow, received an invitation? What did the rest of you do? No, that's not a rhetorical question. How did the rest of you get on the pastoral council? Elections. Very good. Very good. Whatever works to connect the pastor to consultative bodies is what works in the parish. But when it works, define it, explain it, so that all members are clear about their roles and responsibilities and their purview. It is a formal connection between head and body that is through the neck. And these vertebrae are the structure through which consultation happens. But it's hard to build any momentum or make progress over a several-year prioritized plan when, with each changeover in membership or pastors, we have a whole different understanding of consultation and the role of people in the parishes. So now we look at the vertebrae that are the structure through which this consultation happens. If the neck is too rigid or calcified by an unwillingness to change how we've always done it, the head stares straight ahead, fixated on the heaven that is yet to come, but the feet of the body trips over what the head cannot see. If there's too much flexibility in the neck to accommodate anything and everything, the head falls forward and only sees the body, specifically the navel, but cannot see or be a vision for where the parish is going. Sometimes we can create a stiff neck. The connection between the head and body is too formal, the agenda too controlled, and the discussion is slow and limited. Then there is the slipped disc. Somewhere in the structure, personal agendas and a meeting dominated by reports. The deeper discussions either don't exist or somehow don't happen. It is when the conversation is out of whack, where we spend a lot of time in wonderful small talk. And then the meeting starts, and all of a sudden, if you're like me, you doodle as a parade of reports come through, and the opportunity for meaningful conversation is too short. Discs are slipped when communications are poor, and there's not much sharing between the parishes and the diocese, or the diocese and parishes. You can come up with all sorts of other maladies of the neck, and it's a creative list for a diocesan or pastoral council critique and review. Fortunately, like the spinal cord that runs through the skeletal vertebrae of the neck, the movement of the Holy Spirit animates the body and inspires the head. Between the neck bones are that semi-gelatinous tissue that both connects and cushions the vertebrae. In a theology of the neck, it is one of the C's, the C of conversation. By analogy, when the cartilage is thin, bone rubs on bone, and there is inflammation and pain. When there is ample cartilage, bones are connected and cushioned. In the intersection of skeletal bones, cartilage helps the body move with ease and unity. Conversation is sacred. It is more than small talk. Meetings between individuals and organizations through structured conversation contribute to the ease and facility of parish and diocesan operations. Conversations are organized and effective, and they do build cartilage. As our imperfect human condition goes, meetings can also be an arthritis, an area of inflammation, swelling, and pain, where sharply pointed calcification stabs the muscle and chips the bone. We can take the creative and destructive power of conversation for granted. In its creative way, it's part of what is looking ahead with vision. In its worst way, it's gossip, it's divisive, and it cuts people down. In all our conversations within the church, it is good to ask ourselves, am I building up or tearing down? And what really, as a disciple of Jesus, am I called to do? To build up or to tear down? And how does my speech contribute to one or the other? We can use conversation simply as a protracted form of communications to share information. Perhaps this is why we can keep conversation on the surface. Cold enough for you? Theological conversation, however, is a critical component in building not only the formal relationship between head and body, but conversation also builds the body of Christ. When Jesus asked his apostles, "Who do you say that I am?" he was not looking for information. It is the beginning of a dialogue in which the apostles are guided through conversation to a deeper understanding of the very nature and mission of Jesus Christ. The church is not a business, but as good stewards of the people's gifts, we are wise to use good business practices. Likewise, the church is not a democracy, but as good leaders, we need to hear the reason why a majority of the body disagrees with the decision of the head. It is always better when the decision of the head reflects the wisdom in the body. Pastoral councils have, in many blessed times in my past, saved me from moving ahead with something that I thought was going to be a no-brainer, and it turned out, oh, that wasn't the case. We have this thing we call sacred cows. You know, this thing where a pastor coming in would have no clue that that's where the parish all finds their sense of identity. In one parish, for another pastor, it was the infant of Prague. It was water damaged. The silk on the doll looked like it was from 300 BC. And the pastor figured nobody cared. And he took that big box with the infant of Prague and put it into storage before he determined who would get it. Oh, the babushkas. They didn't wait for Sunday. They were there at daily Mass, waiting for the infant of Prague to be returned. We could never know, but the people know. And representatives of the people on pastoral councils help pastors understand where the infant of Pragues are, so that we don't get caught up in dividing the parish over things that we may not consider to be the most important part of living out our mission. There's an old saying, talk is cheap. We have a cultural bias that views talk as less desirable than work. And true, a parish or a diocese can have a lot of meetings where nothing gets done. But the work of the church, and that's for some of us who are doers, need to start doing some of reflection on this Pastoral Ministry Day conferences. And that is, the work of the church is found more in meaningful conversations than in any human standard of productivity. Think about that. Sitting as sisters and brothers in Christ and sharing our faith is the most important work we are doing. Yes, if the roof is falling down, we have to get to that. But let's know our priorities. It is why the prioritized plan is spiritual, calling us to a deeper union with Christ and with one another, calling us together as a diocese to move forward as a church. Notice in there, and Bishop Bruce, I have not read it with a fine-tooth comb, but I don't think you ever mentioned the word boiler. For there to be conversation between head and body, the very nature of consultation is first and foremost an opportunity for theological discussion. And there, in the prioritized plan, are many sections that have incredible theological discussions for a group of disciples who are lay leaders of a parish. We must watch out for, however, that we don't reduce consultation to small Christian communities for faith sharing. That disconnects the head from the body. Here is where the diocesan pastoral plan can focus theological conversation within a process of consultation that strengthens the neck. In the formal process of consultation between head and body, the conversation must be intentional, of movement from the ordinary world in which we live to the extraordinary mystery of God. Otherwise, we're going to corporate board meetings with the CEO as owner of the corporation. With the best of intentions, parish leadership in both the head and body can become very business-oriented. There is some value to that, but it also plays into our bias that the goal of every meeting is to get through the agenda. It is also a bias that sees a successful meeting as one that accomplishes something, gets something done, and makes good use of our time. Likewise, meetings can be seen as a failure when nothing gets done, and therefore it was a waste of our time. When we gather and pray together, if nothing else happened, isn't that the best use of our time? Consultation in the church is not solely about productivity, nor is it simply a process to delegate power from the head to the body. I think this, now you do it. First and foremost, sacred conversation between head and body is a movement towards unity. Prayer are the bookends of every meeting. Praying together is the first step of working together. Consultative meetings, whether conflict-riddled, harmonious, or expeditious in the ways of business, are successful when they contribute to a greater unity in the body of Christ. The conversation may begin with what divides us, but it must end with what unites us. Again, sacred conversation is a movement towards Jesus Christ and towards one another, so that united in faith as church, we move together on this pilgrim path with a shared vision, a shared mission, and a shared ministry. We are all part of what we are all doing as a church. In the Catholic Church, no one should be left behind. When the pieces of the neck are put together, when canonical heads and consultative bodies are connected, one of the principal tasks is to be an employment agency. Zero employment in our spiritual work is not usually written as a goal. In some parishes, we still have a lot of spectators in the pews. In other parishes, it's one of my favorite lines when I was a pastor, of too few people doing too much of what too many other people should be doing too. The diocesan pastoral plan, therefore, is a job listening. Formal consultation is the process to call gifts, assign tasks, and do the work of the church. And so what I would like for your reflection is to kind of look at an x-ray of the neck of the parish or the diocese. I've already heard one gentleman comment on getting more communication to pastoral councils. One way of doing that is to have the diocesan pastoral council as an agenda item on every pastoral council. That way, the diocesan pastoral council can provide some updates so that you can look at that as a pastoral council. But it's a two-way street. It means pastoral councils and parishes also provide a way for the Diocesan Pastoral Council to hear from what you are doing. Again, do not choose either or. It's not about top-down or grassroots up. Do both and find ways to fill the Pastoral Council agenda with a sense beyond the buildings and the boilers and the buildings, and begin to look at what builds the body in our parish, which is inseparable from building the body of Christ in the diocese. This way, it's always easy for someone from outside of the diocese to provide guarantees. So I will, with good discussion, formal definitions, adaptation to the character of a parish, where there are consultative structures that formally are defined to seek shared mission as a diocesan church, it will greatly reduce all the body aches and the headaches of the church and leave it just with your aging pastors. God bless.
Thank you very much once again.